in all of the panels that I've done over the last 2 years, my wife is always keep telling me, I want to talk about voice, right? And she is a performance marketing guru and a search engineer. So she really gets SEO. And she's like, what are we going to talk about voice? And so this panel is born from the fact that I do listen to my wife. It may be an unusual skill for men, but I do actually listen. And so we're going to talk about the challenges and the opportunities of what voice can do. We're going to look at how it's already evolved, but also the way in which it's going to evolve even further. Audiences that have embraced it and opportunities that still are untapped. I'm going to start out with Kath. And Celine, did you find my little... Yes. Awesome. So you should all remember to put your business cards into the bowl with... Yeah, because there is a Google Home Mini that will be given away at the end of the panel. Okay? Yes, that is a shameless promotion of our product family. But at the same time, if you don't use these products, you won't understand how useful they are. Okay. Kath, you talked about the voice was sort of the original interface. You talked about voice being the original user interface and that its usability at its most pure. Can you talk to us about that?
I certainly can. So the reason, it's actually pretty simple why I say it's the original UI. We started speaking as humans, and we really are going back to that interface. So what I find so exciting about voice, and I've basically lived and breathed this stuff for the last 18 months, is exactly that it is absolutely frictionless, and we talked a lot about that. You talked about that yesterday, and we'll talk a lot about that today, but just that ability for anybody in society to be able to, it doesn't matter whether you can read, whether you can write, whether you can, you don't have to understand that, you just have to be able to speak. And that's one of the true levelers. So, and then the next bit of your question was around why I'm so excited from I think a design perspective. And I think, human-centered design in the digital space has been something that we've talked a lot about over the last few years. But this is, take it from someone that builds this stuff day in and day out, this is true human-centered design. So you can't put anything of your brand, you can put your brand into the experience, but you have to build an experience that really is around the user, because it has to be anticipate what they would say, what they would expect to hear. So for me, it really goes back and strips everything back and builds experiences that are truly for the user. And I am super excited about that, because I think I've come from 20, 25 years in digital, where particularly at the start, we were building experiences that were, quite frankly, on behalf of the company. If you were a business unit, you had a tab at the top. That was how it was. So. Understood.
Samia, you talked about inclusive design. Can you teach us a little bit about what you mean?
Yeah, and I was just thinking about it as you were talking about voice is so universal. To first answer your question about inclusive design, and then I'll go into that. One of the things that we've been definitely advocating for across Google, and now it's catching on industry-wide, is this notion of designing products for everyone, right? Many times we end up designing for a target user. We all have to prioritize when we are building products, and we say we want to build for this age group or this kind of demographic. And many times what we don't realize is in doing that, we are not necessarily looking at second-order effects that a product can have, whether it is kind of gender-based or ethnicity-based or socioeconomic, or developing world versus developed is another great one. Many times we take for granted that everyone has the connectivity and the smartphones, and then you realize people are still on these tiny phones. And like in India, many times people are like, they have to uninstall an app to make space to install a new app, right? And these are not design patterns we are optimizing for when we first start out. So inclusive design is about how can you do your product design, and whether it's engineering, visual design, marketing, or kind of brand placement from the get-go to broaden that demographic reach so that your product has a larger scope, kind of larger funnel for driving engagement and driving growth. And it's also a good thing to do, right? Like we've been doing a lot of inclusive design hackathons across Google to just generate more grassroots interest in it. And sometimes you get these fascinating feature ideas which seem so obvious later on, right? Like, so one idea was in Google Maps, how many of you use walking directions? I think many of us use it, right? And it gives you some time estimate, and sometimes it says, you know, you'll reach here by 10:10, and then 10:15, catch this bus, and you'll get there. And someone pointed out that if you maybe are like pushing a stroller, or you're handicapped, or you're an elderly, your walking speed may not be what it's calibrated for. So why don't we just have the phone calibrate to your walking speed so it becomes a less stressful experience? Seems so obvious now that the idea has been mentioned, but that is an example of inclusive design. It's suddenly just making the product more delightful for everyone.
You talked about how voice presents a new frontier. Where do you see people are embracing it? Where do you think we are in the evolution? What do we need to do to move further and faster?
I mean, I think at best voice is in day 0 currently, right? So if Jeff Bezos says internet is in day 1, then I think we are pretty much scratching the surface when it comes to voice. So I'll add on top of what Kat said. So voice is the natural user interface. I don't think it was an issue of like, are people ready to come back to voice from mobile and chat? But it's more of, is the technology ready to catch up with capabilities that allow us to engage with voice on the digital tools and mediums that we now use a lot, be it IoT or a mobile or other things. So I think it's more of the technology catching up. And I wear the product and technology hat, so I see whether voice and natural language processing capability has matured enough for us to deliver a meaningful experience for the user when we put it in any medium. So where is that medium and what kind of user interacts? So obviously with Alexas and Google Homes that most of you are familiar with, you know that it's at home. As an adult, you probably set a timer, or that's probably the most common. Set a timer, ask for the weather, and as a child you ask for a joke, and that's been the most common use case. But there are certain next level trends and designs that are starting to come in. So with brands that we are working, we are looking at what are transactional, functional, and emotional engagements that you can have through the voice assist engines that are there at home. So the customer starts engaging back with the brand, not necessarily just with Google or Alexa, hence I'm talking to a Google Home and I'm talking to Google, but am I talking to a specific brand, and what is that brand giving to me on a daily and repetitive basis that's consistent with the brand philosophy, but it's repeatedly engaging with me in a friction-free medium, which is through voice at home. The other place that we specialize in particularly, and so personally I obsess on that space, is putting voice in common spaces. Voice in common spaces adds, that's such as in malls, conference centers, airports, etc. These are environments where voice is a natural and convenient. If you're holding on a bag, or if you want to rush to that kiosk and say, where is the Starbucks, or where is the restroom? These are voice-first mediums, which are currently screen and touch and other ways that people explore these. So we try to see how to solve some highly repetitive and short nuggets of problem statements in common space with voice, and then how can we explore that further into a holistic experience where in common space, the people get untethered from the 6-inch mobile phone and get back to more immersive experiences of interacting with technology, primarily through voice, that are around you, not in your hand, looking inward.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because it's interesting with brands. We also work with brands and build voice experiences. And when brands come to us, they often come on and say, well, this is what my brand does, so I'm going to build a voice experience that does what we do. Now, if you're an electricity provider, that can be, sometimes not that interesting, or it may not be super relevant on the voice platform. But I'll give you an example of something that I've seen happen in the last 6 months is we built a skill. So on the Amazon Alexa platform, if you build an app, if you think of it like an app, it's called a skill, and on Google it's called an action. We built the skill for an organisation called Coastal Watch in Sydney, and it allowed the end customer or consumer to wake up in the morning and say, "Hey Alexa, where's the surf app?" And it would show you a picture of your favourite surf spot and tell you where the surf was at for that day. No need to get out of bed if the surf's not playing the game. So that's a great skill, awesome use case. What I couldn't believe is that Coastal Watch are a local kind of organisation. So they're not a marketing organisation, they don't need to market themselves, but they just saw that there was a need for this, so they built it. Why Billabong didn't come along and own that, I have no idea. So you don't have to be, if you're Billabong, you're thinking, well, I sell clothing, so I've got to do something around clothing. No, you don't do something around clothing. You do something that's super useful. And I'm sure these guys would agree that one of the things that we see that's really working on voice is when there's utility, something that's useful to the user and that is sticky, that they're coming back and back for, like a surf report. So if you're thinking about from your brand's perspective, how can I be relevant, don't just kind of box yourself into what you do. Think about what's useful for the end user and how you can associate your brand with that.
Alexa, what's on sale today?
Exactly.
So, all right, so one of the areas that I was educated by this panel was, so I just want to do voice. What's the problem? Is it really that hard? And each of you has come back with actually, it is that hard. Can you share a story, maybe one of your projects where you said ordering a latte is actually harder than you think it is? And explain to us, what was the challenge in ordering a latte? Or what is the challenge of design? Because each of you educated me about this. Can you share?
Yeah, look, I've just spoken, so I'll give you a quick kind of story of this. So we've built, I'll use Starbucks and Domino's, probably Starbucks as an example, so just to follow along from what you were saying. So, if you think about rolling out these experiences in multiple countries, and even in one country, there are so many different ways. I think there's something like, in Australia, 27, 30 ways of saying hello, hey, hi, hello, etc. So the skill really is in anticipating what the user is going to say, because you have to kind of think of that in advance, and that's what we do for a living, basically. So for the Starbucks example, it was incredibly complicated. I say skinny cat, you say low-fat cappuccino, someone else says something else, there's a shot of this, there's a shot of that. Everybody has a different way of saying it. So we had to anticipate all of those, and that's where part of the skill is. I'm not going to say that's the whole skill in it, but that is part of it, is being able to use, and we talk about voice experience, which is like user experience, but our VX experts are having to get inside the heads of their end consumer and think of all the different ways that they would say something, and that's incredibly difficult to do.
And when it comes to designing for everyone.
Yeah, like the accents are different. There's so many different cultural contexts. And so you just need to train your machine learning algorithms to be able to have enough of a training data set from which you're pulling in. So as you learn new accents or new contexts or new ways to frame the same request, you recognize that that's the same pattern or that's the same feature that you've seen before, and this is what it means. One of the things that we had to go through, and this was before voice became a thing, was like 3 or 4 years ago when we were building YouTube Kids app. Our age group, and we were talking about this backstage, our age group was definitely the younger kids, right? Like 2 to 8 year old interacting with YouTube. And we decided to redesign YouTube completely from the ground up in the separate app, in order, because we saw how difficult it was. And one of the things we also realized is the kids are very visual, and also most of them didn't know how to spell things properly. So we were a very text-based search company. We do really well in search for anything. At the same time, to improve the reach with the kids, we had to improve voice-based search. So we improved the algorithms quite a bit for kids' voice recognition, which later on has fed into Google Home and all the other new innovations in voice. So that's about designing for everyone.
Swami, you touched on privacy. As we start to get better and better at recognizing who's talking, is there any other side of this that we might want to be aware of in terms of how users feel about these devices?
No, definitely there is, right? Yeah, definitely there is. So within the context of, so voice assistant is different from like bots or chatbots, right? Fundamentally, I think chatbots partly have not succeeded well because they've solved the functional aspect of solving a problem, but not had a personality. Voice, because of the aspect that its voice naturally comes with a certain personality, and as long as you don't make it boring, it is going to be very deep and enriching. But therein, you're creating a strong connection. So there are studies that have happened in Japan where women actually, for the first time, say that they feel like somebody is listening to them. This is a very profound and significant statement, because in that community and in that ecosystem, for the first time, the fact that they can say, play this song or change this to this song, and something or someone listens and gives a natural language, voice-based response, and then listens to them and acts upon that, is a significant experience that they haven't experienced for like decades in some of the cases. So voice, and hence that voice assist device, whatever form factor it takes, is very personal. And then comes aspects of privacy, intimacy, and how you build a relationship and then what it means. And that takes the form factor of at home, if I'm using it, is it going to behave differently to me versus my husband versus my kids? And how does it recognize that well enough? And how does it create a certain jurisdiction of differentiation? So if I want it to talk in a certain way, it does, but it should not be when somebody else is nearby, etc. So that is still a challenge. I don't think voice mediums are mature enough to deliver that level of intimacy and deliver a personal privacy just between that device interaction to you. The next level is once that I've spoken to it, what everybody talks about today is, does this go to Google? And there are all these cartoons of like, Amazon and Google headquarters with people saying, hey, I think he just ran out of milk. And, we've seen those jokes. So what content goes there and what does not? And that has implications in terms of whether people will adopt it. I don't think the issue is on the consumer side, because we've naturally, as digital-first citizens, accepted that certain portions of our information are going to be available outside, and there are certain ways to put checks and balances around that. From our perspective, where we do voice in common space or B2B environments, like a bank or some other context, there it becomes even more important. So I would like to use voice because it's an engaging medium, but I cannot accept the fact that my customer conversation here can go out to a cloud and get processed in a certain way or reside in a different environment besides ours, because there are other third-party regulators and others that we'll need to answer to, so this medium is never going to go through. 8 years ago, I saw this happen with facial and video recognition. Banks would say, hey, it would be cool, and there were technologies that would allow you to do pretty intense level of facial gesture, mode recognition, and do a lot of stuff. Imagine the optimizations you could have in a branch experience. And all of that didn't happen because of a variety of, in many ways right, but in certain ways just factors and constraints that existed. So that is also going to be a journey that voice will have to go through as it tries to become mature, build the trust across the consumer side and the business side of the ecosystem. And that'll answer that journey of what privacy means in this new world, how liberal are the consumers going to be, how liberal are the businesses going to be.
I don't want to get into a conversation around one or two case studies that will get through the bumps. How many times in our lives will we have an opportunity to start on a clean slate? Right? What are the things that excite you about the definition of a new medium, being able to remove the screen, being able to move beyond the mouse? What are the things that the challenges that you're facing, and the way in which they actually excite you?
Oh, there's so many answers to this. I can't
Pick one.
I can't pick one. But I'll tell you what I'm really, really excited about, which I don't think that, and we were talking about this, that I just don't think that people are really thinking about much at the moment from a voice perspective. So it's pretty obvious that early adopters, the youngsters, they're all into this. They're all over it, and it's sitting in every early adopter's home already, and that's powering their lights, etc. Where we have seen a really big opportunity, and the thing that I think really excites me about voice is actually the elderly. So I have sat in quite a few talks in the last few days around ageing populations, and actually one thing I would say is that it is one thing that unites us globally. So it doesn't matter if you're in Japan or Australia or the US, we have got a problem with ageing populations. So we're building these massive, kind of sheltered housing, if you like, but they don't want to be there, they want to be at home. And what voice does and what it will do and can do today is provide support and the ability for the elderly to be at home. So my dad he still cannot send a text. I mean, he's in his 70s and he just can't send a text. Voice takes out that friction. He doesn't have to be able to see a small screen. He doesn't have to be dexterous. People will be able to turn on lights. They will be able to let their loved ones know in the morning that they're okay. They'll be able to say, turn off, Google, turn off everything, and they can turn off everything. There's so much that, and we were talking about from a depression perspective, because there's a big epidemic with depression in the elderly, as their friends start to die, etc. So having that companionship of someone that they can talk to that answers back, and you touched on this, I think is going to be huge. And IBM are actually all over this, and Watson, and they've done a lot of work in this, but I think voice and the elderly is, watch this space, it's going to be absolutely ginormous.
Yeah, I completely second that. The other thing also I think voice gives you is like friction-free experiences. Things that take you like 5 clicks to do now just happens over time, right? So one of the things that I'm really excited about currently is because I'm also running music at YouTube, we launched our music app experiences, right? Like we've been launching these music consumer experiences and trying to see where can we innovate further. And one of the areas we're definitely investing in quite a bit is this screen-free experience of music. So where you can, through voice, like whether it's the Google Home or Alexa or wherever, you can say, hey, like play me some music, or play me happy music, or more directional things like play me this particular song, but some way to very quickly bring in music into your life, which all of us tend to do, right? In the past, it used to be you turn on the radio, but now it's very much personalized to what you want, to your current mood and current setting. And we see voice playing a very critical piece in building up that launching point to start your music, and also an easy way to navigate and customize the journey you want to go. So if it's a music that you don't like, or you want more of something, you just have to say play more or skip, and it's a much easier way to train to your personal liking and to also diversify. And kind of tying it back to the brand piece that I think one of you mentioned, I think it's a great opportunity for artists to then connect back to their fans, right? We'll have, it's not that the screens are going away, there'll always be companion screens. So you can deliver audio optimized experience while you're still giving them that brand connection to the fan, or saying that, hey, there's a concert coming close to you, would you like to book a ticket? And then you go into a shopping flow right from there. So the possibilities are endless, it's quite a bit.
All right. And Swami, all this stuff just happens, right? So we're just going to re-index the universe. Does this have any impact on the way in which we navigate the digital world today? And if so, what's your perspective on it?
So I think profound. 2 years ago, I wrote blog when Alexa and Google and other mediums were just starting to come saying, what's the future of SEM and SEO in the new world? The way I see it, voice is the new front door to the internet. That's where you're going to start your discovery process as a consumer. And for a brand, it means your customer starts the journey there, potentially. Or at least along the customer journey, that's going to be a key trigger point where either discovering something, finding a validation, inquiring further, or maybe even completing a transaction. So what does that mean for your brand to be present there? And if you rewind back to 20 years ago and the first notions of internet and what you thought of as a brand, for those who have existed in the digital and marketing age, there is a chance to rethink literally every mistake you did or everything you probably did right. You have a chance to completely redo that because it is an entire new medium, an entire new way content will get indexed, content will get delivered. It's not going to be like I ask for a latte at Starbucks and other time say yes, while I process your thing, here are 2 ads that you're going to play. So it's everything is different. The creative, the content, the advertising aspect, how brands get positioned, how you build your SEO equivalent presence and prominence as a brand for, so how can Starbucks own the space of coffee in the new voice medium? Is somebody thinking about that? And they should be thinking about that today. In fact, yesterday. So that's I think,
Excellent.
the opportunity.
Can I just add to
appreciate
that?
the
Yeah.
fact. I appreciate the fact that he just made us 10 years younger, because I've been doing this for 30 years. So if it's only 20, I'm feeling very young today. Please.
Actually, one thing that's interesting that I completely agree with you. Those that know me know that I get up and just bang this SEO drum. Really, we call it VSO now. Voice search optimization is going to be a thing, and I was at South by not this year but last year, and the head of marketing at hotels.com got up and said this, you've been optimizing on Google for the last 5 years and those days are over, and we're back to the Ask Jeeves and Yahoo and those dark years, and that's what this is going to be, because there's going to be contextual search on WhatsApp, there's going to be and you need to get on it. And these brand managers and marketing managers, if they could have flipped tables, they were really annoyed. I don't think I can swear up here. So they were really annoyed because everything that we've learned, we don't have to throw it out, but we have to get better at it. So we have to get our data in order, etc. But one thing that I just wanted to just point out is with voice. So for those of you who've got it, you know that you say, hey Google or hey Alexa, can you ask, and say it might be Domino's, can you ask Domino's to order my usual? So that's a typical brand experience that we've built. That invocation name, so can you ask Domino's, can be a brand, but it can actually also be so we did the biggest, so Flight Centre, which is a big company in Australia, and we talked to them about the invocation name can actually be a word, cheap flights or something. Once you own that, you own it. So it's kind of like domains. For those of you, again, that have been around for a little while, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, everybody was obsessing over owning domains. And we're kind of back to that with invocation names. So you can, if you get on this early, you can actually own spaces. And I'm really just backing up what you've said. I'm not trying to, but just to kind of underline it, to say these are some of the strategies that people are using that are in the know. They're getting on this, they're getting themselves educated. And when everybody else wakes up and goes, oh, yeah, actually this voice, yeah, it is a thing, then some of those invocation names will be gone. Things like cheap flights, best houses, real estate, all of those. I worked for a company that was realestate.com.au. I swear we won the market because we just were called what the market was. So, anyway, that's just mine.
Okay. This kind of feels like we're moving into an era of live, that you're having a conversation. Is that a change? You talked about the difference between how we engage today with different platforms and how we engage through voice. And then that's a transition, because your music stuff, as you said, you went back to the beginning and rebuilt it for kids, and now you've gotten it different. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I think it's definitely changing the interaction patterns and how you advertise, how you monetize, how you attribute back, right? And it also gives you the opportunity now to bring in other visually rich experiences. So you're no longer using your screen to just get commands, because you're doing that through voice. So now you've freed up your eyes to actually see something that's visually stimulating. So in a space where you're like with mainly music and videos, for example, you could be having like a screen experience of the actual video or the live stream of a concert, or interacting with someone else visually, while your audio sensors and other things are focused on something else. Does it make sense? Because you've kind of just freed up real estate to show something else. I don't know if that's what you were going after, or...
No, I think you just killed the clicker. There's no more TV clicker, because you can tell it what you want to watch now, and you can continually experience that. Also, I think we're getting into something that's really user-centric. So HCI, which was how people deal with computers, is sort of now becoming something where it's more natural, more human-centered. And so I think part of the challenge is, you're right about domains, that you've got to be active in this area in order to have a place in the near future. But also, it really brings to the fore the fact that we're talking to everyone. That this is something where, as you talked, the demographic that really benefits is not kids. They've got all the mobility they need. It's people who may have some disabilities, people who have age or something else. And that we're opening up a whole new way of like understanding how people engage, right? And for me, it's always about the math behind it.
Right, and voice is multidimensional, right?
Yeah.
So if I type in a query saying, play me music, it's flat. You just know that I'm asking you for play me music. Now we can use other signals of whether you're in the gym or you're in the house or you're commuting to infer what kind of music you might want. But if I'm in a foul mode and say play me music, it's very different than when I'm in a happy mode and saying play me music, right? Like, so the more we can start training, and we're far from there, right? But if the natural language processing can also tease out your mood, that's a huge signal towards what you wanted, what you can provide to them. And so I think personalization and ranking will become very different once voice becomes a dimension in it, which it's not today.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think also people are thinking about either or, and I mean, Google is has just released in the US. I saw it at South by, so I don't know if it's actually been, but you know, this whole multimodal experience where we're using voice and it has some video component, some screen component. So I think really where voice is getting to is not kind of saying you either use voice or you use the screen. It's kind of allowing you to use both. So, and a really good example of this is we built a skill for Campbell's in the US, and just that experience of being able to, you know, one of our girls talks about chicken hands. So, you know, so having that whole ability to ask for a recipe or find out information when you can't actually touch anything. And it's super annoying when you're trying to cook and you have to go back to your computer and stuff. But it's also useful to have some screen prompts and stuff. So I think everybody is really realizing that it's important for both. So
I was really wondering what chicken hands was for a minute there.
yeah. So it's really just the inability to touch a screen. Chicken hands.
I validate that. I love to cook, and I have voice assist to run all my timers because I'm doing 3-4 things at the same time. It's actually wonderful for people who cook.
Yeah.
I didn't anticipate that, but when I was actually with my wife for the holidays. I was cooking at her parents' house, and we were using voice the whole time to basically help me control the kitchen. I didn't realize I had chicken hands at the time. We have learned through time that it's not whether I'm on the computer or the mobile, but I'm on the computer and the mobile. That multimodal topic, I want to touch on that a little bit more. So what is the idea? How do you see the ecosystem around voice? What are the primary things that you're trying to integrate experiences with?
As such, the most familiar notion of voice assist, which we know as some of these form factors, I think it's already public information that these will come with multimodal. So it's not just going to be voice only. So even in that standalone interaction, there's going to be a voice plus screen. And I think you'll naturally see it because these devices are already out in the market. An example of what we do, which is that multimodal, for example, is in the context of like malls, airports, conference kind of setting, right? So traditionally, you walk into a mall and you said, what's the experience? You're going to go in there, you're going to look painfully in your phone because it's still not optimized to find that Starbucks, which is in level 1102, and try to find how to get around there. More likely, what you're going to do is try to go and look at that big screen and go under F&B section and across 5 other cafes, find Starbucks 01K101, and try to then find, okay, in a map how it is. What if you just walk down there and said, show me Starbucks? And it doesn't have to be a uber smart intelligent engine to just flip that screen into that exact same wayfinding that exists there and just show you that. And this whole process took 2 seconds instead of 5 levels of processing for you and 15 seconds in total. So multimodal will always be relevant because certain things need visual cues. But within that experience, it's been almost entirely visual currently. And there's a way to integrate voice with the current and emerging capabilities with voice recognition, natural language processing, etc., to deliver that in a, like you were pointing, far lesser friction points. So not that my screen is now gone and it's just a voice assistant device saying, go straight, turn right next to Gucci, and as you go down, you're going to see the 3rd door and it's actually black. But it's multimodal that will work, but with voice having a significant enough role in terms of that whole experience to reduce the friction.
As we cruise towards the end of this conversation, and you're wonderful, thank you for sharing. I haven't seen anything about social in voice. Now, we talked about music in voice, and that, I know that that's a major topic for this event, but am I only talking with the assistant, or have you seen anyone who's actually making this like a chat line? Right, the old way phones would work, you pick it up and it rang twice, it was your house, it rang 3 times, so your neighbors, and then as kids, we just pick up the phone and talk to each other?
So my kids use Google Home to call me.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have a home phone anymore. We just don't, we haven't had it for years. And my kids are getting to that age where we leave them at home sometimes when we just run down to the grocery store and back. But I felt unsafe leaving them without a phone. But the phone is with me because the cell phone is with me. So I told them to just learn how to call me through the Google Home. And so they just call using the Google Home. And you can think about how much more easier it could become. You can say, call grandma, or call my friend, or call this. And absolutely, you know, like, and start the conversation, continue it through that, which will then, I think, also translates nicely to like connected devices, which was yesterday's panel, right? Of how that voice can carry with you wherever you're going, and room to room, or in and outside the house, or on a hike, or wherever it is. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, and I think that it will, you know, and Alexa has the drop-in functionality as well,
Right.
where you can just drop in. It's a little scary. They give you 5 seconds, and then your parents-in-law are on a screen in front of you. Yeah, think about that. So maybe not that, but I do think what I have seen, and even in my family, is it's really opened up, broken down some barriers for families. Like my parents-in-law are in the UK, my mum is in New Zealand, and we live in Australia. So that ability for, you know, just to be able to kind of drop in on each other and be able to see each other and just chat. And even if you're doing something like you're making dinner or something, you can still have a chat and see one another. I think that part of the social is really going to have a big impact on how families kind of can come together, and I'm super excited about that. So,
And I'll talk about one that we've actually done and implemented from a social or a bar context, and then one that if you have seen the recent Cannes Festival and one of the winners of the most innovative solution. So our personal experience just on the drop-in. So drop-in, for those who don't know, Alexa has, and maybe Google and Cortana too, but Alexa has this medium where you can talk from one Alexa device to another. So we set this up within a bar when we were doing a event for one of our brand clients. So you're having a drink, you're talking to someone at the table. You don't want to like finish your drink, walk over to the bar, wait for 15 minutes, get a drink. So right there from your table, you can just talk to that device which is there and say, hey, drop into bar and ask me for, get me one more of whatever, martini that you want. And that function just allows you to continue your social context within the bar, but place orders and make it a bit more engaging and seamless. Just to quickly summarize on the Cannes thing. The Cannes winner was the application of Alexa or a Google Home, whatever, voice assistant in a very different way. A lot of the women in most of the countries in the world are not safe when they are walking or they are taking taxi, etc. So the innovative idea was, how can you, now that there is small talk possible in all of these voice engines, and voice is natural because you're talking to someone, so like you're slightly safer because there's someone on the other end, create a way where I'm just calling a normal number, I just have a feature phone or whatever, I'm calling a number, and I'm talking to a voice assistant which is having a small talk with me. So I'm actually having a live real conversation, but for that proximity and the people around, etc., they know that I'm with someone, so I'm going to be safer hence. And of course, a step further, like if something happens, somebody snatched something from me, it knows, and it's a smart engine on the other side, so it's actually able to trigger certain, like for example, an alert or a message to your loved one or so on and so forth. So there are a lot of serious social implications possible with the capability of voice AI. It doesn't have to be physically in front of you, it can be remote as well. And, and a ton of that is on social aspects of interaction.
That's amazing. For a final thought, just something, everyone here is kind of getting a really interesting introduction to voice, but something that you want us to think about. Like what's a takeaway for you? A final thought, Kath.
I think for me is just, I would say to everybody here, just really get ready for the tsunami that is voice. And I said this story, I'm going to leave you with it because in 2007 I was client side, I was sitting in a brand shoes, and I said, this app thing, I don't think it's going to be a thing. Who would ever download an app onto a phone? I mean, in those days that our data wasn't great, it wasn't a great experience, and I truly did not believe that it was going to be a thing. And I stand in front of you today to say I was definitely wrong. Mobile is a thing, and I think that and it really got away on me from a client perspective because we weren't the first. We were the number one, but we weren't the first. So don't be that woman or guy or whatever you want to say. Really think, and I also think one of the things I'm most excited about and why I'm here is I think we've only scratched the surface. I think Google and Amazon have done an amazing job of getting us started. I think I would watch Alibaba and what they do. They are really active in this space as well. So I think we're just at the beginning. We're in that hockey stick, and some of us have been lucky to or unlucky enough to ride that hockey stick, but a hockey stick it is. So get on it early is what I would say.
I think there's so much possible with voice, so just be creative with it. At the same time, I think there's trust and safety, which could mean so many different things. I think you touched upon it a little bit about how much of your privacy is going to get invaded by it. And I would encourage to think about trust and safety from an opportunity point of view rather than a roadblock or a fence point of view. Because I think we need to just be proactive and mindful about, in using voice, what are the things that it's opening up and how can we proactively turn that into an opportunity to build that user trust and safety.
The place where we have proven evidence in terms of how voice applies to a brand is in brands that have physical spaces. So this can be a retail which is saying e-commerce came and killed me, a mall which says nobody is walking into me, a hotel which says Airbnb is taking over my business, a travel company or something that says OTAs are here and I'm dying. If you have a physical presence, or if you have a physical centric business, voice or voice plus IoT in general, which is proximity and sensory experiences, can be the way you differentiate customer experience. Don't go back and build another app to compete with your purely digital competitor, but use voice primarily as a way, because it creates a wow factor, it creates repetitive and highly engaging interactions with your customers. Use that to win the business back.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Can we please have a round of applause for our panel? Before you leave, one of you is going to help me pick the winner. So if I can get business cards up.
We haven't collected the cards yet, James, so just hold on for a sec. If you've got a business card you want to be in the draw, please do so.
Experience Voice, right here.
Thank you very much. Oh, hello, Rosemary. How are you? You missed the best part. Your husband was talking you up big time, but before you got here, saying how wonderful you were. You missed it. That'll suit you being late. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We won't be on selling this data, don't worry. Do you want to write something on the back of it? Something? I've got a pen here, hang on. Do you want to put in your Medicare card? Everyone in? Thank you so much.
Are we there? Panelists cannot enter, just so you know how fair we're being.
Nor can the MC, unfortunately.
All right, Ken.
Hey, Swami, come on, bro.
No, she'll pick.
Swami's going to do it? Kath?
Go on, Kath.
Oh, it's from Fox.
Fox.
One of our sponsors. From
Anoop.
Fox. Anoop, come on up, bro.
Well done. And Anoop, which division do you work for? I hope it's digital. Commercial strategy and communications. Excellent. All right, fantastic. Kath, can I ask you a favor? Can you hold that for me?
Of course.
Thanks.
Around just helping communities. So we're starting in the north of Australia, but African communities to help them.
Wow, we're trending #1. Elf tells me on Twitter. Keep that going. We're going to break for lunch. Can we just, again, thank our wonderful panel. CEO of Women, Mr. Swami Sekar, Somi from YouTube, and all the way from Melbourne, Australia, Kath Blackham. Thank you so much for joining us, co-founder. And, of course, wonderful Mr. Man in Black, Mr. James Miner. Thank you very much. See you after lunch. We are Digital Matters.